Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, March 26, 1912, First Lady Helen Herron Taft and Viscountess Chinda, wife of the Japanese ambassador, planted 2 Yoshino cherry trees on the northern bank of the Potomac River tidal basin in Washington, D.C. The event celebrated the Japanese government's gift of 3,000 cherry trees to the United States. Anyone who has been to D.C. around this time of year will surely say a big thank you to Viscountess Chinda. Viscountess,
Jody, I'm just going to come in here because you clearly don't watch Bridgerton. It's the Viscountess.
Viscountess, but it's spelled V-I-S, so I don't know. But
there's no accounting for spelling.
I was going to say, in Bridgerton, they say it differently.
Bridgerton. You know what? I think I tried Bridgerton for like 10 minutes, but I didn't get to the Viscountess.
You didn't get to the good part.
Okay. But anyway, thank you, Viscountess Chinda, and thank you for correcting my pronunciation there. But look, the D.C. cherry blossoms, in my opinion, are one of our true public treasures. Everyone should go see it at least once. And for me, for what it's worth, it's a reminder that flowers and plants are always a good gift. Mm-hmm. It's one of my little mantras in life is just like always buy the flowers. I try and do it a few times a week. Bring home. No one doesn't like when you show up with flowers.
Facts.
So this is a good example of this. So let's talk about the cherry blossoms. And actually, I have a little list for you, Niki and Kellie, of some other notable gifts that countries have given us. And we can go through those.
Fantastic.
But here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. And happy spring.
Happy spring. Flowers are my love language, so I'm very happy about this.
Hey there. I'm super happy. I get flowers every single week.
I get them from Trader Joe's. Just like a bunch of flowers and all over the house.
I love it.
Trader Joe's marketing executives, if you're listening, just know that you can sponsor the show and we will happily talk about your flowers. Or anyone else, really. I'm assuming all three of us have been to the cherry blossoms. We've seen this in action.
Indeed.
Yeah. I went probably most recently, pre-pandemic, but maybe 2019 or 2018, I took my whole family and we had the best time. We actually weren't intending to go for the cherry blossoms, but it was April and it just so happened that they were in full bloom. And the day was like magical. I mean, it was absolutely breathtaking, taking in all of just not just the trees, but also the monuments alongside the trees. Like it feels like jewelry, It's great.
But there's something so lovely about it because it's only there for a short amount of time, right? So it is like this occasion and a real, I don't know, there's something so lovely about it because it's so fragile or short, and that if you get to see it, it's a really magical kind of moment.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And, I just having I went to high school in the D.C. area, spent a lot of time there, and it's one of those things. I think spring is this way in general, but it's like it catches you by surprise every time. Mm-hmm. You know it's coming, but you still have that moment where you're like, whoa, I can't believe these are out and it's warm again. Like I never expected it, So, yes, it's definitely part of that phenomenon. So this story obviously culminates in the gifting, if you want to use that as a verb, of the 3,000 trees. But to me, much of this story is really about kind of political agitation or persistence. And this is where we should walk on someone with another great name that I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of, but Eliza Ruama Skidmore, who is a travel writer in kind of the late 1800s, early part of the 20th century, who really became the champion for these cherry trees.
Like many Americans abroad, she looked around, she saw something beautiful in a foreign land and said, I got to get me some of these. Yeah. Unlike most Americans, she didn't just take them. She went back and asked for them.
Right. What's that in your carry-on baggage? Oh, just the cherry.
But she did begin to, as you were saying, agitate or lobby in order to get the U.S. to get some of these Japanese cherry trees because she thought they looked beautiful in D.C.
Yeah, and she's not wrong. They are beautiful. And I think her persistence in this is really key because I would have assumed that like someone comes up with this great idea and it's like, oh, yeah, of course, makes sense. But actually, it takes years to get something like this going. She's writing different letters to the National Park Service and different other government officials trying to get them on board. And really, it just takes her getting the ear of the First Lady.
But she plays the long game. Every time there's a new person heading up the Office of Public Buildings and Grounds, she goes there and she's like, I failed with the last person, but I'm going to try this person. And when that person says no, she's like, that's all right. I've got time. Just wait them out till the new person comes in.
Yeah.
And so she's lobbying. She's at one point has a kind of idea that maybe she'll just buy them herself, or just the U.S. will buy them. And eventually it comes, this idea to have it be a gift sort of arises. But a lot of this is because they're building this space and building out this space in downtown D.C., these open grounds around the Potomac. And she gets wind of these plans, and she has this great quote where she says, well, since they have to plant something in that great stretch of raw, reclaimed ground by the riverbank, they might as well plant the most beautiful thing in the world, the Japanese cherry tree, which is pretty compelling logic. And then it seems like the reason this sort of really coalesces under the Taft administration is two things. One, she gets Helen Taft on board, and then William Taft and the Taft family do have a connection to Asia in that Taft had helped establish the government in the Philippines. Establish being a very generous word there.
Might want to use another word there, but
any follow-ups?
They were familiar with the Philippines, Japan, Hawaii, and so I think Skidmore found a kind of generous ears here in sort of saying, hey, you know about those beautiful trees? Like, we could use some of them over here, and the climate works out and all that stuff.
It's also a really interesting moment in U.S.-Japan relations for this to come about because the U.S. and Japan had a better relationship than, say, the U.S. and China. The U.S. had been barring Chinese immigrants since the mid-1880s. But near the end of the Roosevelt administration, when Taft was vice president, Roosevelt puts into place something that was at the time called the Gentleman's Agreement, where the two governments agree not to send any Japanese immigrants to the United States. And so there's a kind of unofficial barring of Japanese immigrants, and they're fully barred in 1924. But that idea of we don't want any of your people does not make for warm relations between two governments, regardless of whether you call it a gentleman's agreement or not.
No. And I mean, the compromise is sort of that for the Japanese Americans who are living in the United States, that they won't be Jim Crowed or segregated, that they won't have to live in segregated spaces.
That didn't work.
No, none of that really plays out. All of this benefits the United States in big ways.
Yeah. So the arrival of these trees, I mean, we have the sort of political will. We have that larger context you just described. We have this one activist who's pushing for it. It finally starts to coalesce, but it is not that easy. Maybe this is an obvious thing to say, but it's not that easy in the early 1900s to get 3,000 cherry trees from Japan to Washington, D.C. In fact, it kind of takes 2 attempts. So let's talk through the sort of rocky road that these actual trees take to get into the actual dirt in Washington, D.C.
So the First Lady's lobbying does pay off. Tokyo's mayor supports the idea of donating 2,000 trees, and they ship these 2,000 trees to Seattle, and then they have to get them from Seattle to Washington, D.C. So there's a long process of just getting the trees into the city. And they plant them, and they start growing, and it's great until a year or two later when the trees become infected, and they have to burn them to the ground. And
they burned the first batch of trees.
Yeah,
really
that was heartbreaking. There was an insect called a nematode that basically gets inside the tree and kills it. And so to keep it from spreading, they had to incinerate all of the trees that were there. And when I think about this, I think about when my husband and I bought our first house, we had a huge cottonwood tree that took over the whole backyard. It shaded the entire backyard. And then the Park Service people came to us and said we had some sort of virus and it was going to infect all of the trees on the block. And so they had to cut it down. And I was like, oh, I feel like I lost a friend. Losing a tree is just, that's sad. But they do get more trees, 3,000 more, and bring them over to the United States.
It's a high-stakes election year, so it's not enough to just follow along. You need to understand what's happening so you are fully informed come November. Every weekday on the NPR Politics Podcast, our political reporters break down important stories and backstories from the campaign trail so you understand why it matters to you. Listen to the NPR Politics Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're like me, you have probably tried a lot of different ways and are continually struggling with trying to eat better. From meal prep to cooking at home, one thing that has really helped are Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. I've been trying them recently, have a bunch of them in my fridge. They are really delicious. And one thing I really love is that you get 35 different options to choose from every week. And they're in really helpful categories like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And within 2 minutes, you're going to be having a restaurant-quality meal. It's a perfect solution if you're looking for fast, premium options with no cooking required. And don't worry, we've done the math for you. Factor is less expensive than takeout or restaurants. So head to factormeals.com/thisday50 and use code thisday50 to get 50% off. That's code thisday50 at factormeals.com/thisday50 to get 50% off. I will say one interesting thing here is this first batch of trees, they ship them from Japan to Seattle, then they put them on trains, and then they go across to D.C. And all this is happening in like December and January, and that just jumps out to me as like, how are you keeping these trees warm? Maybe that's why they got to, I don't know, it just feels like shipping across the northern United States by train in the middle of winter feels like, But
they put them in insulated freight cars.
In the second batch, at least, they put them in insulated freight cars, and there's this whole logistics. But they do it again in December and February. I'm like, what? And maybe maybe I just don't know the life cycle of a cherry tree. I'm like, this feels like it should be more of a summer thing, but maybe they were trying to get them in time, right before they blossom into the spring. But yes, February 14th, interestingly enough, very fitting. In 1912, 3,020 cherry trees from 12 varieties get shipped on the SS Awamaru, which goes to Seattle, and then in those insulated freight cars, they end up in Washington, D.C. In March, as we're saying, of 1912, Viscountess Chinda and Helen Herron Taft plant 2 of these trees as a kind of symbolic moment. The first ones are planted about 125 feet south of what is now Independence Avenue, kind of really close to where the MLK Jr. Memorial is right now. But anyone who's visited knows that they kind of now encircle the entire reflecting pool and sort of that entire area in D.C.
And the First Lady, in response, gives a gift as well. She gives a bouquet of American Beauty roses. What do we think of that as a trade? 3,000 Japanese cherry trees, a bouquet of cut American Beauty roses.
That will die in a week.
They're not going to make it back to Japan.
You can give them rose bushes or something like rose seeds. I don't know, something that would last a little bit longer, but I don't know. Feels like the American way. I don't know.
I like the symbolism of it, though, the American roses for the Japanese cherry trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to get to a couple of these other gifts that have been given from other countries to the United States, but I will say, I would love to hear from people in D.C. about the best spot to watch. I mean, everyone loves to go down to the Tidal Basin, and it's insane down there during peak cherry blossoms. And then I think people in D.C. always have their secret favorite spot where there's actually really great. My family always went over to Kenwood, which I don't think is that secret, so we can give that away. But, that's in Maryland, but it's like incredible there and often very crowded too. But I'm curious if listeners have little secret cherry blossom spots that are a little less crowded.
Yeah, avoid the weekends. I think that's
way down there.
key.
Yeah,
you can go
but like we're saying,
early morning.
It's a 3-day window. The window. Yes, if you can go. Yeah, but it's the window is the window, and so what are you going to do? Like you have to go see it when it's peak.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. I want to read you some other gifts that have been given to the United States by other countries, and maybe we can measure them against cherry blossoms, and you tell us whether you think it's a better gift than cherry blossoms, and then we'll see if cherry blossoms are in fact the best gift we've ever been given. But Ireland gives us a shamrock bowl every St. Patrick's Day. It's a crystal bowl filled with shamrocks. Better or worse gift than...
Worse.
Worse, but not bad. Like, that's a good gift.
No, all these are great.
A crystal.
All these are great. We appreciate
the shamrocks, not so much. But the crystal bowl,
I was mean to Ireland last time, so I'm going to say it's a great gift, but just not quite as good as cherry blossoms.
Gambia once gave us a giant ostrich egg, elaborately decorated ostrich egg. It's a symbol of fertility and prosperity.
I mean, where are you going to
Does it blossom?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, good question.
Does it blossom?
On a display, I mean, I'm still picking cherry trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bhutan, known for its philosophy of gross national happiness, once gave us 108 singing bowls. The bowls are used in meditation and are supposed to bring peace and happiness.
I'm going to say this is the closest because one of the things that's great about the cherry trees is that they're the gift that keeps on giving. And I feel like those meditation bowls are like they have a use. They can, we could use a little more Zen in Washington.
Yeah. I'll put it up there. I'm still picking the trees, but I'll put it up there.
And you can use those year round too. I will also say.
That's right.
Okay. We're going to skip over the dolphin that New Zealand gave us. I think it was a dead dolphin. It was a dead dolphin for research purposes. For research purposes. Micronesia gave us a navigation chart. Pretty cool. Swaziland gave us a rhino shield. Okay. Let's get to the top tier here. China gave us some pandas.
Oh, pandas.
Right.
You
Those
know
are
what?
cuter than cherry trees.
Wait, are they at the National Zoo? I mean, are we talking about the same?
Yeah, they were at the National Zoo. Yeah, Ling Ling and See.
Okay,
Sing
so
Sing.
I took my kids to see the pandas at the zoo, and that was like, my son was really, he still is into Kung Fu Panda, but but that was so special. I can't even tell you. Now, I do have real sort of political issues with zoos, but even still, I like the fact that I can see a panda like that. I put that right up there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just immediately nix off the list that France gave us a replica Liberty Bell. Like it was not...
Give us the real thing or give us nothing.
Yeah. So it's like apparently still near the original Liberty Bell, but it's just this other thing. We'll get to another
Eiffel
France
Tower.
gift in a second. Well, so then I think we have to talk about probably the most famous gift another country has given us,
course.
which is the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so I think this is the final matchup here. Statue of Liberty versus...
Man.
Doing brackets, are you, Jody? In the middle
This
of March?
is tough.
Interesting.
It's much madness.
I gotta go with Lady Liberty. I mean,
Really?
it's iconic. You think of America, you think of right on the water, New York City. I mean, what is New York City without Lady Liberty? That's tough though. I feel like this is
Kellie's
cheating.
not wrong, but I felt like that was a little mean to whip out at the end there. We were doing so good.
I know. Oh man, I want both.
Jody,
we
what's
can
your
have
vote?
both, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the one other one I'll throw in there, I do think I would go with cherry blossoms as the ultimate winner. But Niki, might be right up your alley. Russia apparently in the 60s gave us a bronze statue of Laika, the first dog to go into space. I can't figure out exactly where it is, and it may have gone back to Russia or something, but somewhere in there was an exchange of a bronze statue of a cute little cosmonaut dog.
I'm not mad about a cute little dog statue.
Yeah. So there you go.
But over Lady Liberty,
I'm not picking it over Lady Liberty because there are, I have to say, like a lot of dog statue, FDR's dog. So, Lady Liberty is more unique in that sense.
Well, there you go. Listeners, you can chime in with some of your favorites, but we will leave it there. You can get in touch with us at thisdaypod.com or email us thisdaypod@gmail.com with your favorite gifts that other countries have given us, or maybe we can do gifts that the United States has given to other countries. But we will wrap it up there. Happy cherry blossom season to everyone. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
my pleasure.
Radiotopia.